The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to AmericanSchismBook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Bob Yari. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I'm looking at your Wikipedia bio and the bio that your PR company sent. And it says, I got to ask right off the bat, it says, Yari was born to a Jewish family in Tehran, Iran. Is that right? Yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
Were there a lot of Jewish families in Tehran?
Back during the Shah's time, before the Islamic Revolution, there was about 80,000 Jewish people in Iran. And I think that number has dwindled down to a small fraction of that. I think most of them left with the Islamic Revolution.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm looking at, born 1961. So you and I are like a year apart. I was born May 62. So, yeah, that was long before the revolution, about 17 years or so, yeah? How long did you live in Iran before you came to the United States?
Well, I actually came when I was about a year old. And then because my parents lived in Iran at that point, but I had an illness that for some reason I couldn't have the food and water there, but I was fine in the United States. And half my family lived in the U.S. then. So I came and lived with my aunt and uncle in the New York area. And then when I was 8 years old, I went back to Iran and lived with my biological parents.
Okay, so you were living there from the time you were 8 to how long?
To about 15, 16, when I came back to the U.S. and went to boarding school.
Okay, so it was all pre-revolution then, yeah?
Yes. My experience in Iran was all pre-revolution.
Can you give me a little bit of a picture of what life was like then? Because we see all the news now, and it seems pretty restrictive. It was a lot freer of a society, right? I know Pan Am had daily flights to Tehran back in those days. And
back then, it would be hard to imagine it today, but back then it was relatively westernized under the Shah. I mean, women walked around just as they did in the West, wearing miniskirts even. And you really didn't see the Islamic covering like the chadors and the headscarves that you see now, unless you really went into the more religious parts of town. So yeah, it was very, very open and free, and people had, relatively speaking, almost the same freedoms of speech and everything that you have today in the West, with of course the limitation that you really couldn't do that against the Shah. That was a restriction on the population, and I think partly responsible for the revolution.
Oh, you couldn't criticize the Shah publicly?
At that time, that's correct.
At that time, okay. All right. So you didn't live there at all then after the revolution, or did you go back? No? No,
I actually couldn't go back. I don't think they would have been too friendly to my family Although I believe there are still some Jews that live there, I'm not sure they're terribly welcome these days.
It doesn't sound like any place I would want to go anyways, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so, all right, so you came to America, and how did you get started in the film industry?
Well, since I was a kid, even back in Iran, I was gifted a 8mm movie camera, and I was fascinated with film and its effect on people, and I used to make small films and show it to my friends and family. So I ended up in film school at some point, and I graduated with a degree in cinematography, and that's how I got started in film.
What was your first gig as a? Were you an actor? Did you study acting at all, or were you go straight to production?
No, I was always in production. Never had much of an interest in acting. Although there was a case where a director threw me. I was an assistant director on a NBC miniseries, and the director threw me in there kind of by force. And I did my first little part. But other than that, I haven't really acted.
So you've done quite a few films here. The one that I've seen actually is Crash, 2004. You were a co-producer on that one?
One of the producers.
One of the producers. What's the difference between a co-producer and one of the producers?
Well, a producer credit is generally someone who's really responsible for putting together the entire film, whether it's hiring the director, getting the financing together, getting the distribution together, getting the funding originally together. That's a producer's job. A co-producer is kind of, I think, a credit given to people that are involved in some capacity, but they don't have the entirety of that responsibility. So it's a lot of times it'll be given to one of the actors or one of the actors' agents or managers or someone that made an introduction to someone. So it's a non-common credit, so to speak, co-producer.
It almost sounds like it's just a sort of a gratuitous credit, you know? Just like,
it can be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what is the difference between the executive producer and the producer? I'm always confused what the roles of those two are.
You know, it's very interesting because they tend to reverse when you go to television. But as far as theatrical motion pictures, a producer is kind of that person that I described to you. It's the person that gets the rights originally, whether it's the rights to a magazine story, a script, a book, or someone's idea, hires a screenwriter to then write the script, hires a director, puts the crew together, either takes it to a studio for financing or brings the financing in other ways, including bank loans and foreign pre-sales. An executive producer is generally much more limited to just the financing side of the equation.
Oh, I see. Okay. So the executive producer is basically the money man, and the producer sort of does everything else?
Pretty much, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell? Okay. So you've got a book. We talked about that before we got on. The book is called A Human Condition. And let's see, the subtitle is A Pathway to Peace and Fulfillment. Is this a spiritual book? Describe the book a little bit for me.
Well, the genesis of the book was basically my life experience growing up, including the bit we talked about, which was some of the experience I had in Iran as a kid, and seeing, a third world country and the poverty that was there at the time versus life in the United States, and what struck me as a kid and then continued throughout my life as I observed people of different socioeconomic sections, I was always fascinated by how happiness played into each person that I got to know. And what I started seeing was that happiness doesn't really have too much of a correlation to material wealth. And the people that I found to be the happiest, some of them were extremely poor. And I also conversely knew billionaires that seemed relatively unhappy. So I've kind of developed a life philosophy, so to speak, of, finding that happiness and adjusting my own attitudes. And so I decided to write a book on what I see as the human condition, how we're predisposed to react, and some of our natural programming that served us in the past in some capacity, but in the modern world actually can hamper our happiness. So the book talks about how we can use the power of our minds to adjust our attitudes in ways that can enhance our own happiness.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, and I've seen that myself too. The example that you gave of the billionaires being kind of unhappy and the poor people being real happy. I spent 3 years in Thailand teaching English 13, 14 years ago, and saw poverty that I never saw in the United States. And yet these people were just very content to live their lives, and they always had food, they always had family, they were always laughing, they were always talking about something. And then I've known people who, multimillionaires, billionaires, whose life was ruined if their swimming pool water turned green.
We've had a similar background then in that respect. And you're absolutely right. A lot of times that wealth is in and of itself the source of
the unhappiness. Well, because they get not all, but what I have noticed is that the people that are extremely wealthy, they get very paranoid. They start to think everybody's just after them for their money. They can't have real intimate relationships with people. They put the wall up, and the wall becomes a sort of a barrier to their happiness because they can't experience happiness.
Yeah, you're so right. And kind of rightfully so. If you're this guy with all this money, everyone wants to be your friend. Who's really your friend? Who would be there for you if you didn't have those billions?
Oh, yeah.
And that's hard for someone to work through. So you're right. They put up a wall. They tend to, they tend to not have close friends.
No, and they're the victim of their own wealth is what it becomes. And on one hand,
very true.
On one hand, it's sort of hard to feel sorry for them, though. But on another hand, you do in a strange sort of way, because they're sort of stuck. If somebody comes to them and says, well, listen, maybe you should just give away a lot of that money. Give it to charity, give it to whatever. They probably would do some of that, but I don't think they would get to the point where they could find the happiness again. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think there are ways. And that's, again, one of the reasons I wanted to write the book and share it. And what I said to myself is, look, even if it helps one person, it's great. And at least it's putting my thoughts down in writing. Even for someone that has that wealth, if you really decipher and start understanding what the circumstances are and how you're reacting to them and how you're perceiving them, I think there are ways for all of us, actually, in any area of life we find ourselves, to make it better for ourselves in terms of being content and happy. And that doesn't mean, there's a secret that makes someone 24/7 dance in the streets. We all have problems. We all have troubles. We're never going to get rid of those. But I think at some level you can increase your basal or core happiness level where you're more content in life and less prone to make mountains out of molehills, so to speak.
So in your book, are you giving people some guide, some steps that they can do? Can you give us a step?
Yes, of course. I mean, there's several, but one in particular that I practice still. Every night, and I suggest this to people in the book. I say, before you go to sleep at night, just take 60 seconds as you're laying in bed and reflect and make a short list of all the good things in your life, all the blessings in your life, as much as you can, as small as they are. Start just acknowledging them and being grateful for them, from just simple things like having shelter, having 3 meals a day, having good family, good friends, living where there's a lot of natural beauty around us. And what I think people find, and I certainly find, is that list is almost endless. But we forget to acknowledge these things. We take them for granted to a certain extent. So when we make that list in just a minute or two, it just starts creating more weight on the good. It doesn't get rid of the bad. But as we balance the two against each other, we start acknowledging, wow, my life isn't that bad. I have so much good, and it makes us able to deal with the negative that's going on in our life, which we will always have some negative in our lives. It makes dealing with it a lot easier.
How do you deal with a toxic family member who you can't get rid of? Is it about the mindset that, in other words, they're going to come at you with their stuff? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I talk about that a little bit too, and it's, there's always people that will do us wrong in life, whether it's deliberate or not, or whatever it is. We'll always have reason to be angry at someone. And one of the things I suggest, which takes work, it's not easy, and I say this in the book a lot of this stuff doesn't happen magically. You have to really work at it and think about it. But in a way, if you start hatred is a very toxic emotion, and it hurts us much more than it hurts the target of our hatred. So if we focus on, like, even if you have a family member that's quote toxic, and the trick in my mind is to lessen our hatred or dislike of that person, but keep your distance from the person. Create distance. It's like if someone does you wrong, don't carry hatred and negativity, but of course, make sure you learn from that, and you don't really deal with that person, or you create separation in your life, so they're not able to create any negativity for you, to the extent it's possible, of course.
I think for me personally, it's not possible to completely eliminate this person out of my life, simply because it would be, I don't know. I feel like it would be a bad thing to do, to just shut that person out of my life. But there has to be a point where I got to adjust my own head, because within 10 minutes in the room with this person, we're into an argument. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be just anything. And I've never understood that. It could be anything from the color of the pants I'm wearing to politics to no matter what. It's like they disagree with me for the sake of disagreeing. And I never understood that.
Right. Yeah, and that's tricky, because there are some people in our lives that it's difficult to create the distance. But again, you said the key word. It's adjusting our own heads. And really that's what the book is about, is the power of our minds to affect how we think.
Yeah.
And how we react and how we even perceive things. We can, it's kind of like that glass half empty, half full analogy, but in reality, we absolutely can affect, we can look at negative things and have it be very debilitating to us, or we can look at them and maybe even find a way to have them energize us to fix it or counter it or become challenged by it. It's all about perception. It's all about attitude. Again, I think you said it best. It's changing our own head.
Yeah, well, I tell you, this person is good for one thing. If you're half asleep and need to really get a shot of adrenaline going, 2 minutes in the room, and I'm ready to go. Better than 5 cups of coffee. It really is.
Right.
So, okay. Anything else you want to add? How long has the book been out?
It just got released a few months ago, so it's pretty new.
Okay.
And it's very short. It's not, I tried to make it not a repetitive, the same concept over and over. But it is, it's basically something that I hope will help the reader find more contentment in life.
All right, great. And I think now that COVID is sort of slightly winding down, are you having any productions on the horizon? Anything that you want to talk about or can talk about?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm involved in a new company, a new studio that was recently put together called 101. And we have Yellowstone out, which the 4th season is coming out in November. And we just started shooting the prequel, which is called 1883Y, a pretty epic 10-episode production about the Hutton family of Yellowstone and how they come to arrive at their ranch. I'm not sure if you've seen Yellowstone, but it's last year it was the top-rated TV show.
Where is it on?
It's on Paramount Network.
Paramount Network, okay. No, I have your bio here. It says stars Kevin Costner, and
yep.
The new one, the 1883Y and Mayor of Kingstown, starring Jeremy Renner.
Yep, and that's shooting up in Canada right now, and
okay,
that'll also be released in November.
Now I'll have to check it out. I haven't seen that one. I've seen some of your films,
well, if you get it,
but I haven't seen that.
Well, if you get a chance to see Yellowstone, you'll truly like it. It's really, really good.
It's a drama?
It's, the best way I can describe it is it's like The Godfather, but set in a Western.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Current day Western.
Oh, Godfather. Okay. Wow. Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely check it out. Well, sounds good. Well, Bob, I'll let you go. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Do you have a website you want to give out, either for the book or for your production company?
The book does have a website. It's the-human-condition.com.
Okay.
And well, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It was nice talking to you, and best of luck with everything.
Thanks so much.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hey, this is Ray Powers. Don't touch anything. You've got it right where you need it. Tuned in to the Douglas Coleman Show. You heard me.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Tarick Walton. Hey, Tarick, how are you?
I am doing well, Douglas. How are you?
Oh, doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. So your bio is very interesting. Let's just go through a little bit of this. You were born in Jamaica? You're from Jamaica?
Born and raised in Jamaica for 18 years, and then left the island with the sole purpose of getting an education. So traveled to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I went through the most difficult experience of my life. Gave me a few gray hairs, but survived. Studied at MIT, and traveled all over the world, worked in various locations, and fast forward to the present.
I grew up in Boston, so I'm very familiar with MIT and that area in Cambridge.
All right.
You must be pretty smart to have gotten into MIT. But I find that interesting because on your bio, I thought you were a professional tennis player.
No, not a professional tennis player. I love tennis, since primary school days, Douglas. I just really value the what tennis stands for, the competition of tennis. So I've been playing tennis all my life, throughout high school to the present, never professionally, but the analysis of the sport, the psychology of the sport, I really see it goes hand in hand with MIT, just the principles and everything.
Oh, I see. Okay, so the book that you're promoting, which is called Secrets from MIT Tennis and the Umpire Above, it's sort of a symbolic comparison between the game of tennis and the life at MIT?
Exactly there, Douglas. And, in all simplicity, it's all about life. I think there was a quote from Andre Agassi that said, the average tennis player goes through so many different lifetimes during one match, because there's so many different emotions, there's so many different psychological challenges throughout a match.
Right,
and, it's so similar to MIT because what people may not realize, but the motto of MIT is mind and hand. So it really tests the mind and how you solve problems with your hand at the same time. And, when you think of tennis, that's exactly what tennis is. It's such a mental sport where, there are no coaches during a match. There are no teammates to pass to. It's just you with the racket in your hand, overcoming all of the mental challenges and physical challenges that you're going through.
That's a good point, and I never really thought about that until right now. But when you watch other sports like football or basketball, aside from those being a team sport, and tennis is really an individual sport, they all have coaches on the sidelines yelling at them. And, it's very annoying. For me, I find it terribly annoying. And yet, even in boxing, which boxing is an individual sport, but you still got your trainer yelling at you from the ringside, right? And tennis is the only one where it's a little bit more dignified. It's quieter. People sit still. People don't jeer and yell and scream during the match. They're supposed to stay very quiet. It's more like golf in that sense. But yeah.
It really is. And you gave some good examples there, Douglas. And that's the main reason why, you can always learn powerful lessons from sports in general. But when I look at all the sports, I love sports, by the way. So all different sports, I love running. When I see the Jamaican girls or ladies, finishing 1, 2, 3 at the Olympics in the 100-meter sprint, I love all different sports. I'm very proud of them.
I want to read something off your bio because it sounds very interesting. I'm just going to read it. It's the last bit of the paragraph. It says, one day, on a crowded taxi ride home from school, Tarick experienced a life-altering moment which would change his life forever. What was that experience?
Wow, we're going right into it, man. That was roughly age 10, Douglas. I was at St. John's Primary School in Jamaica, and I'm in a taxi. And to paint the picture, in Jamaica, there are multiple riders in one car at a time. So just imagine 5 people in the back seat and 2 people in the front passenger seat and 1 driver. So when you do the math, that's roughly 8 people in the car. So it's packed, it's tight, and there's no air conditioning, so it's hot. And the outside Jamaican sun is 95 degrees Fahrenheit easily.
And humid.
And humid. So that was the setting, and there was a lot of traffic going on. So we're creeping in traffic, and we're getting closer to an intersection. And as we got closer to that intersection, I saw somebody from a distance, and immediately I recognized who that person was, because the person was physically disabled. You know, it was one leg. The person had one leg and one crutch. And I knew who that person was, who was my classmate. His name was Paro. As I looked in the distance, I saw Paro begging every car that was passing by. And this was the reality that Paro faced, because he was poor, he was pretty much homeless, begging on the street. And as I said, he was a classmate of mine, so he was another 10-year-old who did not get the chance to go to school that day, but he was out there begging. And when we got closer, this was how that taxi ride changed my life. As we got closer, the driver said to Paro, in a very jovial or, funny way, "Hey there, Paro," in a very funny, jovial manner. And the person followed up saying, "Paro, you're begging, Paro the beggar." I was hiding, I didn't want to show my face because I didn't want Paro to see me and all, see that I saw him. And I'll never forget it here, Douglas, that Paro did something astoundingly unexpected. Paro, instead of responding in a negative or an aggressive way with that assumed disrespect, Paro looked inside the taxi, saw me, and because of a very special day that occurred prior to that, Paro responded saying, "Tarick, the Prime Minister." He responded, "Tarick, the Prime Minister." And I was just blown away at that point, Douglas, because I was just blown away simply because here is a tough situation, uncomfortable, hot sun, begging on the street, one leg, one crutch, could not afford a replacement crutch, and encountering, quote unquote, disrespect.
Right.
But he instead said something so powerful to another 10-year-old that literally changed my life from that moment onwards.
That's an amazing story, and it has a lot of value and a lot of meaning that, unfortunately, a lot of people wouldn't get in this life. I think particularly in the United States, where we're so busy chasing material possessions. But it just shows you that somebody who has absolutely nothing, and probably less than most people, if you said he was missing a leg and he was begging on the street, and yet he still had his soul. And that's what you saw. Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head there, Douglas.
Yeah, that's what he still had.
He still had his soul. He still taught us something so powerful, which was even more valuable than gold. Like, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have what Paro had,
you won't
never
find
have
it.
that happiness.
No.
Yes.
Money doesn't find your soul, that's for sure. In fact, if it does anything at all, it blocks you from finding your soul. It puts a wall up. The more money you have, the thicker the wall is, the higher the wall is. That's really...
You hit the nail on the head there, Douglas.
Wow, okay, great story. So when did you come to the United States? When you started at MIT, you got accepted to go there and you came over?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So
all right.
Was, as I said, 18 years old, and just got all my stuff into 2 suitcases and went off on a journey to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to try and figure out how to graduate from MIT. And
So how long ago was that?
So this was 2007.
Okay.
So it was the yeah, so roughly 14 plus years, that I came here.
So you graduated, I presume?
Graduated in 2011, and just so many different. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, to share all the different experiences from that moment that I met Paro, saw Paro, to the very last day of graduating from MIT. I wanted to package all of that into a book to give youth, to give others clear guidance on what it takes to achieve your dreams, to inspire others that they can achieve their own dreams, and then most importantly, to help others to avoid Paro's fate. So if there's the nonprofit that I founded with a group of friends, the mission is to just support and offer support to other youths, just so that they avoid that reality that Paro experienced.
Well, it's a two-sided coin, the reality that Paulo has experienced, I think. Because on the one hand, he was tuned into something that many people never get to, where is that connection with your soul. And although his physical situation was very dire, his spiritual situation, I think, was well intact. Yeah? Wouldn't you agree?
I will agree 100%.
Yeah.
His spirit, he just passed on a positive, enlightened perspective to me.
Yeah.
And I don't care about other things where, some may say, was Paro always perfect? Quite frankly, nobody's perfect.
No.
It's the thing that really matters is, what do we do for others at the times when others need that help?
Exactly.
And
right.
Paro amazed me. Roughly 2 years after that experience there, Douglas, unfortunately Paro died.
Oh.
It was pretty sad. I was at high school at the time, in Jamaica, but it just resonated with me at that moment that it's my mission in life to, one, provide service to other youth so that they can avoid the fate that Paro experienced. But more importantly, or equally important, my mission in life is to find that peace, to find that internal joy and that God inside that Paro had that guided him.
Yeah, that's a great find if you can find it. It's not easy.
It's not easy at all.
No, it's not easy to find. But some people find it. Some people do. Some people never do, like I said before. We've got just a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to hit one of your talking points. I'm sorry we can't get through all of them, but the show is not that long. But this one was intriguing to me. It says, what is the significance of the number 31?
The number 31, it's two significances. The first thing is, for anyone that is visiting Jamaica, I encourage you to visit. But the number 31 is the exact location that Paro saw me in that taxi.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up on St. John's Road, and my school was St. John's Primary. I went to St. John's Seventh-day Adventist Church. So all of my life growing up at that young age was along St. John's Road. And I saw Paro specifically at 31 St. John's Road.
So it's an address.
And
okay, I got it.
It's an address, one, but then the second component of it, it's really my target in life. I think it's, an experience through business and leadership is always continuous improvement. So what we've done with this nonprofit is we set a target of 31x. So within a specific amount of time, our goal is to reach 31 students. And as we achieve that goal, we want to surpass that and target 3,100, 31,000, continuously improve to make that difference in society. And, it's a target with number of youth that we connect with, and that's why we wrote the book, to reach a broad range of youths and individuals as a whole, but also partnerships. So it's 31X partnerships, whether it's business, non-profits. That's our target. So it's a physical location, 31 St. John's Road, but then it's also a target of achieving 31X number of students and partnerships for our goal in service.
Oh, well, that's great. My guest is Tarick Walton. His book is called Secrets from MIT, Tennis and the Umpire Above. We do have to wind this down. Do you have a website that you want to give out for the foundation or a personal book, whichever one?
Absolutely. And the website covers both. So thank you once again here, Douglas. The website is twaltongroup.com. It's T as in Tom, Walton, WALTON, group, GROUP.com. And from there, you can see a link to purchase the book. You will see opportunities to be involved with this nonprofit, which is called the Walton and Friends Nonprofit, and to be of assistance and make that difference in society. So, twaltongroup.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. Very inspirational, very interesting. It was nice talking to you, nice meeting you, and best of luck with the book and with your foundation.
Absolutely, Douglas. It was indeed a pleasure talking with you, and good to know that your Boston stomping grounds, coincides with my experience as well.
Well, I moved away in 2005. I live in Las Vegas now, but I kind of miss it. I don't miss the winter, but I miss the seasons. I miss the environment. I miss the ocean. There was a lot of great things about New England that I do miss, but I get back there one of these days. All right, Terry.
There we go.